we can hear you, John. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everybody. I've been tasked today with explaining the somewhat dry details of SB 1120. SB 1120 is a state bill which, if enacted, becomes law applicable to the entire state. The constituents will not vote on this bill, so the decision will be made by our elected officials. 1120 is the most sweeping in a package of housing bills moving through the legislature and the biggest zoning change that I can think of ever. The group of bills is essentially a cumulative replacement for SB 50, which did not pass through the legislature last year. 1120 was introduced by Senate President Tony Atkins along with Senator Scott Wiener, who authored SB 50 last year. The target of the bill is to spur housing construction and to provide more affordable housing. California has a documented shortage of housing. This slide from the California Department of Housing shows our cumulative shortage, though that shortage exists almost completely at the low income levels shown in blue, and the need varies between our various cities. The figures also show on the chart below an actual surplus of above moderate income housing, and that our own area has produced beyond its state assigned goal of new above moderate income units. The bill allows, but does not directly require that affordable units get built. Allows building, but does not directly require that affordable units get built, nor is there a provision to generate funds for affordable housing builds elsewhere. The units to be built under the provisions of the bill are all market rate units. That contrasts with some other state policies like the state density bonus, which require a contribution of affordable units when increased density allowances are given. The theory relied upon in 1120 is that, to some extent, a large increase in market rate building will have a trickle-down effect and cause more housing affordability. That's a theory on affordability creation that has some arguments both ways. So how does the bill create units? The bill proposes to do so by applying statewide zoning changes. Zoning and land use are typically set at local levels, in our case, via city or county code. Historically, each locality has its own general plan, in our case, more detailed community plans, and its own underlying policies such as specific zoning. In LA, as in most areas, housing goals are incorporated into that zoning package, with R1, which is single family zoning, shown in the depiction on the right in yellow, R2, R3, and then R4, also shown in orange on the area map, which are medium density family zones. And then we have also commercial, manufacturing, and open space zoning. The zoning of each of the lots in the city or in an area dictates what may be built on the lot, and cumulatively, they allow a buildable capacity currently beyond what exists now. This map also shows the blend of uses in South LA, and the blend is common between cities across the country, in the end determining the way our land is laid out, functions, and what we experience. Single family neighborhoods, shown in yellow here, are prominent in almost every city and are by no means unusual. Most of us see them as beneficial. Occasionally, cities alter the zoning on individual parcels to meet changing circumstances and needs as we face now. For housing, that can mean building housing on commercial lots, shown in pink on the map, building larger on the orange multifamily sites, or even allowing ADUs in single family neighborhoods. Locally, those recent policy changes have already increased our buildable capacity significantly. We've enacted new community plans and new policies such as the TOC. This bill proposes a less nuanced and massive change that's statewide. The scope of the change is huge in both transforming neighborhoods and the breadth of its application. Across the state, the majority of residents live in R1 single family zones. The chart here illustrates in dark blue that 65% of the state's homes statewide are single-family homes, with 31% of homes existing within the multifamily buildings shown in the light blue. The bill's authors believe that maintaining this dominant single-family zoning is unjust for our society, so the goal is to remove it and allow substantially more density, in essence converting single-family zones to moderate multifamily zoning. There are basically two main upzonings contained within the bill. While the provisions have a statewide applications, there are some exceptions. The main ones being that the bill only applies to urban areas like ours and other cities. Rural areas are exempt. Properties designated as historic landmarks or those in historic districts are also exempt. For those of us in View Park, the Dons, and Baldwin Vista in the very high fire hazard zones, contrary to belief, there is not a categorical exemption, nor is there one for sensitive hillsides. The first part of the bill is a duplex provision. It requires allowance by localities of 2 separate units on any one property. Examples of this build out would be shown here on the screen with a before above and an after below. Also, new accessory dwelling unit provisions could allow accessory dwelling units additionally. All of these units may be owner occupied or they may be rentals. The multiple units can be constructed in addition to an existing home or by demolishing homes and building all new. These slides depict the replacement of single-family homes by new duplexes. As far as demolitions, there is a limitation on demolishing in cases where the property has been occupied by a tenant in the prior 3 years, or where the property has some sort of rent controls. However, Los Angeles does not apply rent control to homes, so the majority of homes allow for demolition and complete new construction. As far as existing zoning or building standards, some would be allowed and some local rules will be overridden. The chart depicts some of the new provisions of existing standards. Any limits that are subjective would be disallowed. There will be limits on how tall things may be built. And for R1, that's typically a 33-foot height, which is 3+ stories. What changes will be the number of units allowed on a property. Also the setbacks, which are the distances a building must be built from a lot line. For sides, the distance is reduced from an existing 5 or more feet to 4 feet. And the most significant change is reducing minimum rear yard setbacks to 4 feet from a current minimum of 15-foot rear yard. All allows a greater proximity of buildings to neighboring homes. Parking requirements in existing code are also reduced and with new standards. Currently, a single-family unit must have 2 parking spaces. The units created under this bill will require 1 parking space per unit, regardless of unit size. Beyond this, there's a special consideration for units within 1/2 mile of quality public transit, a condition which is not uncommon in all of South LA, especially South LA. The assumption is that these people will have fewer cars. The map shown here with areas in blue shows the extent of these qualifying parcels in Los Angeles. For these areas shown in blue, 0 parking would be required. Projects may not be forced to provide parking beyond these minimums. The second, more dramatic provision of the bill is its lot split provision. This provision has the same basic applications as to where it is allowed and its few exceptions. In this case, there's an additional requirement that a lot must be larger than 2,400 square feet to qualify. However, that's of little significance, as essentially no lots in Los Angeles are less than 2,400 square feet. The figures shown here illustrate that without removing the small number of historic homes, 98% of Los Angeles single-family homes are of adequate size to qualify for the provisions of the bill, and that total is 6 million homes statewide. What this portion of the bill allows is for a single-family lot to be split or subdivided to create 2 separate parcels. Those parcels can then be separately owned, built upon, or sold. Lots may be split and sold actually without construction of dwellings. Lots must be split into equal parcels, but these can technically be as small as 1,200 square foot lots. Current Los Angeles minimum lot size for single family dwellings is 5,000 square feet in contrast to 1,200. This portion also allows for demolition of existing homes with the exclusion of homes which similarly have been rentals within 3 years. A single family lot may be subdivided into 2, and then each resulting lot may contain up to 4 separate dwelling units. The basic provision requires the allowance of 2 units on each of the 2 subdivided lots, but then accessory dwelling unit provisions could be applied to build 2 additional granny flats on each. So a common result from one lot would be a minimum of 2 to 4 total units, and in some cases, as many as 8. This image illustrates the conversion of a single home on the left to 4 units, and the second image shown is a depiction of a before and after of the neighborhood with the splits applied on multiple sites within a block, resulting in much more density. All of the units under this provision are also permitted to be rental units. This section carries the same set of setback standard relaxation and parking relaxation as the duplex provision. Buildings will be allowed to be more closely approaching their neighbors, and each unit can only require 1 parking space or even 0 parking spaces if within the half-mile proximity to transit. As a builder, these locations become particularly attractive. There's discussion also about the infrastructure burden triggered by the required added density, as that's one of building's real impacts. That infrastructure burden involves local systems such as water, power, sewage, streets, traffic control, communications, even schools, and emergency services. Obviously, there needs to be capacity, and it has to be paid for, which is a concern in strapped cities. Legally, the state could be seen as responsible for those improvements or funds. However, the bill's solution is that localities are allowed to charge fees. However, that does not necessarily translate into the local ability to promptly overhaul our large infrastructures. Also, another state law actually limits the improvements a city may require for small subdivisions of fewer than 5 parcels. Another significant impact of the bill is that while duplexes and small subdivisions currently do get built in our areas, the process gets changed by the bill. The bill requires that qualifying projects cannot be denied and that approval must be granted ministerially. That means that they are essentially by right projects and that approval must be granted in a more cursory way. Currently, under our existing system, interested parties, whether they be residents, local officials, business owners, churches, or any other stakeholder, can all consider and receive notice about individual project details with a chance to opine. They can participate in this and on how to solve housing needs while seeking to minimize negative impacts of building and also maintaining the beneficial aspects of each neighborhood. This is done by advance notice, access to builders, neighborhood council meetings, public hearings. This is an important component of self-determination, especially with the built environment. It's why planning has almost always been done locally, not at the state or federal government level. In the bill's simplistic eyes, a 20,000 square foot lot in suburban Sacramento is looked at identically to a 6,000 square foot lot in the hilly Baldwin Hills Fire Zone or a 4,500 square foot lot in vulnerable Hyde Park. with localized treatment if there's a desire to promote local density and even upzone some lots. A holistic plan might have the city placing density in various locations and having them preserve single zoning in particular neighborhoods where it's less available than other areas. This chart shows that with 38% of the acreage devoted to single family lots and 48% devoted to multifamily lots, South LA has drastically less single family and more multifamily than most of the state or even the urban area. In South LA, we are already dense. Cities can similarly elect to set density near jobs or in repurposed decaying commercial properties instead, while still creating housing. That's the type of specialized consideration we currently have and what's lost in the 1120 process. An alternative method to 1120's mandated reforms has cities required to reach state housing goals and sets consequences for not doing so, but still enables each to have latitude to decide how. Another key change regarding the ministerial approval is that in order to do so, other state procedural law has to be differently applied. All of these projects have to be exempted from review under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. CEQA is currently a tool for giving extra attention and then extra mitigation measures for some projects which may be deemed to have adverse effects. That additional level of protection would not be allowed given the state's categorical CEQA exemptions.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, it's me. We're winding down to about a minute or so before we have to, so.
I'm 1 more minute.
Thanks.
Okay. Another particular aspect of this bill, which is consequential for South Los Angeles, is our concern that these upzoning bills spurring market rate building, allowing for demolition in neighborhoods with a concentration of transit, brings a concern for speculation, displacement, and gentrification. Others will discuss details, but this is a notable detail in the bill's language. Last year's SB 50 acknowledged these factors and created options for what it recognized as sensitive communities. That includes parts of South LA. There is no such provision in this replacement bill. The one protection it includes is disallowing the same developer from applying the lot split multiplex projects on consecutive lots. However, the same developer can do so on alternating lots, or separate developers can do so on a sequence of every lots. So those are the key details of the bill as written. If passed, it will change the landscapes of how many people live with little input. From a professional perspective, as a builder and broker, this bill is a boon. As far as balance for the building industry, it's a get with almost no give. So thank you.